Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning about the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund FY23 Data Collection Overview. I'm Jerry Beth Nave, the Director of Relief Funding, and I have with me today Julia Hudson, the West Tennessee Coordinator, and Michelle Harless, who is still working with us a bit as the East Tennessee Relief Funding Coordinator. And we will be going over the ESSERF data collection for this year. Our work is grounded in the components of Best for All, and we know that ESSER touches each of these: academics, student readiness, and educators. And this drives our work at the department and across the state. Our agenda for today: we will begin with just a review of the data collection and why we do this. We will then conduct a walkthrough of the entire data collection instrument. We will discuss common mistakes in the data collection that we have seen in previous years. We will also do a check for understanding. And then finally, we will provide some resources and have our closing. Why relief funding reporting? The short answer is that it is federally required by the statutes from which these funds originated. Any LEA who received any of these funds is required to complete this annual reporting of the expenditures. Next slide. This slide shows the reporting periods for the specific funds. As a reminder, the funds on which you are reporting will always lag 1 year, meaning that this 2024 collection that we are doing, you will be reporting on your expenditures from FY23. And as you can see, it will close on May 3rd, 2024. Some reporting period reminders. Again, this is for the state fiscal year 2023, which means it's from July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Those are the dates about which you will be reporting your expenditures. So unless a question specifies differently, and there are a few that will, you will only report on the activities that occurred during the above dates. Next, I will turn it over to Julia, who will begin the data collection walkthrough.
Thank you, Jerry Beth. To get to the report, it will be similar as it has been in years past. You'll go into ePlan and you'll go under Data and Information. You'll need to look under 2024, and there you'll find the Education and Stabilization ESSERF data collection. If you would like to log into ePlan as we are going through the slides, the instrument will be open. And so you can follow along with us as we go through each slide. The technical guide has also been updated and it's linked in the presentation. It's also under TDOE resources and it's linked in the instrument along with some other resources that Michelle will share about later. The due date for this year's instrument is May 3rd. So you'll see that we have quite a bit more time this year to get this completed. So we want to encourage you to start as soon as possible because we know that things start getting very busy as May approaches. I'm very sorry, skipped ahead. The sections are basically the same as what you have seen the past 2 years, but you'll notice there are a few new sections that we have highlighted throughout the presentation, and these are going to be those same sections that we shared way back in August at the Federal Programs Institute if you were there with us. I won't go through each section specifically. This is just a quick overview, but you'll see within the instrument, all of these sections are listed. The new section here is an additional use of funds, and this is going to be by activity, which we'll talk about in just a minute. You also have another new section, Section 4, subsection B, which is activities by subpopulations. Of course, the first thing you're going to do is complete the cover page. Make sure that each section of that is completed. A lot of times that kind of gets overlooked and forgotten. So that's going to be your first step. Then you're going to see definitions that you might need, as well as those reporting periods, which we shared about. This is going to be pre-populated as it has been, and this is just a note to show what your allocation was for each of those ESSER funds. Starting with Section 3, subsection B. So you'll remember that for the LEA level, we actually start in Section 3. The SEA has some things to do in Sections 1 and 2, so that's why it may be a little confusing there. The first section that you're going to work through is that use of funds detail. We have done this the past few years, so this should be getting familiar if you have been here. But this is where you'll provide the amount of LEA expenditures by each ESSER subgrant fund, so ESSER 1, 2, and 3, and the expenditure category for the current reporting period. So just remember, one thing to know is to make sure you're only reporting those one time. An expenditure is incurred by the LEA when the state makes the reimbursement for that expenditure. That is how Ed has defined it for us. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next couple of slides, but that reimbursement date is going to determine the reporting period that you need to put those expenditures in. If you have a certain category that you did not spend any funds, then you will need to enter 0. So like I mentioned, Ed has provided us a definition for expenditure, and we just talked about when the state makes that payment and you receive that reimbursement from the state, that is going to be what qualifies as an expenditure. So that reimbursement date is what you need to be looking at, not when it was requested. So we'll go through a couple examples here to just make sure we've got this in our minds as we're moving forward. The first one is an LEA pays for an ESSER eligible good or service on May 31st, 2022, and they submit that expenditure to the SEA or the state to us for reimbursement on June 21st, 22. They receive the reimbursement on July 9th, 22. That would need to be included in the FY23 report. So this report that we're about to work on, because it fell between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th of 2023. That is when the expenditure was actually received. An LEA pays for an ESSER eligible good or service on April 20th, 2022, and submits that expenditure to the state for reimbursement on May 1st, 2022. They receive reimbursement on June 15th, 2022. That would not be included in the FY23 report because that reimbursement was received in FY22. So that should have been reported in last year's instrument. We've got a couple more examples here. An LEA paid for something on September 15th, 2022, asked for reimbursement September 28th, and they got that reimbursement October 15th, 2022. So that is within that fiscal year 2023, which is July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. So it would need to be reported. Along those same lines, if you go down to the last example, They received or paid for a service on March 14th, 2022, and submitted that reimbursement in July of 2022. They received reimbursement in July of 2022 as well. So even though they requested, or even though they paid for this in March, they did not receive reimbursement until July, until after the new fiscal year had started. So they would report that in the FY23 report, in this upcoming report. Section 3, subsection B, moving on, we have an appendix that you may remember from previous years, but this will just be helpful in figuring out which category some of your expenditures may fall under. So this kind of breaks it out into a few more specifics, and this is also linked within the document, and it just kind of helps you figure out where certain more specific expenditures may fall. And again, we always say use your discretion. Of course, every single thing is not going to be referenced. You just, choose the best category, make sure that you're reporting it one time and that you're being consistent. We have added some additional clarifying instructions to the chart in the tool because this has been a common area for mistakes. Typically, what we have seen is LEAs will report the same expenditure in both of those final two columns. So if you notice within the instrument, there's a column for ESSER 1, column for ESSER 2, and there are two columns for ARP ESSER, which is ESSER 3. So what we've noticed is a lot of times LEAs will report expenditures in the first ARP ESSER column, and they will report those same ones again in the second. So we added some additional instructions here. The first column in ARP ESSER is going to be any expenditure that was not related to learning loss. Okay, so you replaced HVAC. That would not be a learning loss expenditure. The second column is going to be your set aside expenditures. So that is that 20% that we have to allocate, that minimum 20% towards learning loss. And this is what you spent during the reporting period in FY23 towards learning loss. And these are all going to be based on that July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023 date. One thing to remember is that if an expenditure was not tagged and approved as learning loss in your funding application during that fiscal year, then you should not report it in that final column, okay, because that has been closed, and so you can't go back and change those things now. Another thing to look at here is that it would be helpful if you subtract what was expended towards learning loss, right, and put that in your set aside expenditures, and then what's remaining is going to go in the first column. So anything that's not related to learning loss. Those two columns would sum to be your total ESSER 3 expenditures in FY 2023. Okay. So like I mentioned, use your discretion, select the most appropriate category, and be consistent. We're just reporting this one time. So now we're going to look at the ESSER use of funds by activity. So this is one of those new sections. We did talk about this way back in August, and we had a template that we shared that hopefully LEAs have found useful. What you will notice here is that you're separating those expenditures by activity. This is going to be more specific, and it looks very similar to the appendix that we shared from previous years. But you will not separate learning loss expenditures from other expenditures here. You're just ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. There's not going to be any separation within ESSER 3 in this particular section. Again, you're just reporting this once, and they should total what you spent for each grant during that reporting period. So this is really helpful. You can see here, it's a side by side comparison of those two expenditure detail reporting sections. So you can clearly see the difference. The first section, 3B1, the one we have had in previous years, that's where you're going to separate learning loss from other ESSER 3 expenditures. The second section, the new section, 3B2, is where they are all under one category. So it may be helpful as you work through the instrument, you'll notice that the sum of the two columns in 3B1 that fall under ARC ESSER should equal the sum of that final row in 3B2 where you're reporting your combined ESSER 3 expenditures. Moving forward, you have the planned uses of your remaining funds for ESSER 1, 2, and 3. This is where you'll just provide the percentage of remaining funds and what you have that planned for. This is preloaded, so this is going to be based on June 30th of 2023. Now, if you spent everything before that date, then you may have zero remaining. In that case, you would just enter 0 in those boxes because you did not have anything left to expend at the end of your reporting period. This is planned uses. So this is based on what your plan was for the money that was left after June 30th of 2023, if you had remaining funds. So look at what you have spent since the end of the reporting period and what you are planning to spend in the future to determine those percentages. And if you don't have a plan yet for a certain category, hopefully we do as for ending the year of ESSER, you can enter 0. We have 3 additional sections here. The maintaining safe in-person instruction. This is similar to, we've had this in years past. You're just going to select yes or no to indicate whether you spent ESSER funds on any of those listed items. Then you have ESSER funds to provide internet access. Again, you're just choosing yes or no to indicate if you spent funds on those items as well. And then re-engaging students. So that is just similar to the ones before. Did you or did you not use certain methods that are listed to re-engage students? Finally, we have the hiring and retention section. This is going to be related to specific positions that are listed in the instrument. So you'll provide the total amount expended for the listed staff, just for those specific positions. And this is going to be a little bit different because this is cumulative across all ESSER funds, okay? So positions that were funded under ESSER, it's not going to be broken out. I spent this from ESSER 1, 2, or 3. This is all ESSER funds. You should not include stipends and bonuses here. We've talked about that in previous years. This is for salaries and benefits. So you will provide the total number of positions supported with ESSER funds. The first box is the only box where you will be entering a dollar amount. So that's going to be where you put what you actually spent. Everything else, you're just putting the number of positions. So you'll notice that this is not going to allow for decimals. So it's not going to be percentages of FTEs and things like that. This is just how many positions, head counts, basically. So paraprofessionals, we hired 6. Nurses, we added 4. And if you didn't hire or retain any of those with ESSER funds, then you would enter 0. And hiring would be new positions that you hired with ESSER funds. Retention would be current staff members, current positions who have been retained but are now being paid with ESSER funds, being supported with those ESSER funds. So maybe you paid a teacher out of your general purpose, but you moved that teacher to be paid with ESSER funds in FY 2023. So that would be what you would put for retained positions. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to talk about the remainder of Section 3.
All right. Thank you, Julia. So Section 3, subsection C, will be used for LEAs who opted to allocate funds to schools. This is similar to how districts allocate Title I funds. I will note that the majority of districts did not do this. And so those districts will just need to check the first box attesting that they did not allocate funds to schools. If an LEA did allocate funds to individual schools, they will need to complete the page to indicate how the funds were used. In Section 3, subsection D, the first box is for providing the total amount of funds reserved for learning loss in ARP ESSER. That's your at least minimum of 20%. The second box is for providing the total amount expended on learning loss during the current reporting period. This amount should match the total at the bottom of the far right column on the Section 3B1 use of funds details page. So that's a good way to cross-check. Also new this year, you will use this page to report the amount expended in FY23 for each specific activity listed under learning loss, and provide a narrative regarding how these funds were used to respond to the needs of underserved student groups, such as your English language learners, homeless, migrant, foster, and students with disabilities. New this year is Section 4, subsection B. You are required to report how ESSER funds, and this is ESSER 1, 2, and 3, all funds, supported various activities used for learning recovery and acceleration by subpopulations. For each of the listed activities, the first question is if the program was available to all students. If the activity wasn't available to all students, you will want the total number of students that could be served if you were serving at full capacity. Next, you will provide the total head count for those who participated in the activity, along with the number of eligible students from each of the listed student groups. For these activity reports, districts will pull live reports from their student information system. Please pull the average daily membership, and we do suggest a consistent date be used, such as October 1st. This page shows you what the activities page will look like. You will have these pages for several different activities, including summer learning, after-school programs, extended instructional time, high-dosage tutoring, early childhood education program, full-service community school, and purchasing educational technology. In Section 4, subsection B, you are also asked for the total count of students enrolled by subgroup. You will have students counted in more than one group and should count them in all subgroups they qualify for. So an example would be if you have an English learner who is also a low-income student and is a migratory student. That student would be counted under column B, C, as well as E. You would count them 3 times. In subsection C, the LEA is asked to provide the FTE count for certain staff assigned to each school. The staff to consider include special educators along with paraprofessionals, ESL teachers, school counselors, social workers and school psychologists, and nurses. If a staff member's time is divided between schools, you will also split the FTE in the reporting. And we give the example here. You have one full-time nurse shared by 5 schools. That would translate to a 0.2 FTE for each of the schools served. In section 5, subsection A, the LEA will list a total FTE count for all staff as of September 30th, 2023. This total includes full-time plus the equivalent for part-time positions, and this is regardless of how they are funded. FTE totals for years 2018 through 2022 will be pre-populated. We do recommend that you work with your HR department and finance department for the total count of employees for this section. Some additional data that you will plug in, the LEAs will use check boxes to select strategies and activities that ESSERF supported during the reporting period. And then additional questions that require short answer will include how the district used innovative programs, purchased educational technology, or improved their school facilities. The LEA will also report how students impacted the most by COVID-19 were identified and how the district determined allocations of funds for these particular groups. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Beth to talk about common mistakes.
Thank you, Michelle. In the next few slides, I'm going to discuss some things that we have seen, I guess, several times over the past couple of years during the data collection. These are all things that Julia and Michelle have covered in the walkthrough, but we just kind of want to point them out again because like I said, these are common mistakes, things that we have seen repeatedly. So one of the first ones is that it's in the ESSER mandatory subgrants to LEA's use of funds details. And we see that expenditures have been reported across multiple years. And this is likely due to the expenditure being reported during the wrong reporting period or wrong data collection period. An example that we have is an LEA reported $25,000 in supporting physical health and safety personnel services salaries for the reporting period of July 21 through June 30th, 22. So this would be the FY22 report. They received reimbursement from the state on July 15th, 22, and reported that expenditure again in FY23. This happens a lot because of that definition that we get from Ed of when an expenditure actually happens. But in this case, the example in the slide, because the LEA did not receive that reimbursement until FY23, then that expenditure should only be reported in FY23. We advise LEAs to review their previous report to ensure that expenditures are not being reported more than one time. And that if you do find that an expenditure was reported incorrectly, please reach out to one of us and we can help get that corrected. And I will add one other thing in our frequently asked questions document that will be linked at the end of this presentation and also in the data instrument. We do have some screenshots from ePlan of exactly where you can go to find when the expenditures happened. Next, we want to talk about some things that we have seen on the hiring and retention of specific positions page. On this page, the far left corner calls for an amount, an expenditure amount, a total for all of the positions. Every other box on that page should be a head count of the number of people hired. And this is from ESSER 1, 2, and 3. So we see that we see expenditures being listed in all boxes. But again, all boxes except the far left should be a head count, not an FTE. Stipends and bonuses are sometimes included here, and those should not be. This is just for salary and benefits. And again, we many times have FTEs noted. LEAs are wanting to list these as FTEs, but it is a head count of personnel on this page. The next common mistake that we have seen was the total from column 4 on the use of details page not matching the amount indicated on the second box of the impact for learning loss page. This second box on the impact of learning loss page is for that specific amount of the 20% learning loss set aside requirement that has been expended during this reporting period. If it is reported accurately, it should match when cross-checked with the total amount listed for learning loss on the use of funds details page. And on that reserved to address the impact of learning loss page, another mistake that we saw was because the numbers in the two boxes were reversed. As I previously mentioned, the second box is for reporting expenditures tagged as learning loss during the current reporting period. The first box is for the total 20% set aside for learning loss in ESSER 3.0. On full-time equivalent positions, these totals should include all LEA personnel, regardless of the funding source. So this is everyone employed by the LEA. So it could be school level, it could be central office, maintenance, transportation, everyone. And one thing that we have noted, these will be pre-populated from previous reports, so you will only be reporting on the current reporting period. But if you do notice that a previous year has been reported incorrectly, please let us know and we can make a change. This is one of the areas in which Ed does flag if there is a 20% or more difference from what has been previously reported. Next, I will turn it over to Julia, who is going to do some checks for understanding.
Thank you. All right, the first question is CARES Act, so it's ESSER 1 funds, will not be reported in FY 2023 instruments. Is that true, false, or it depends? So it depends. Most LEAs do not have ESSER 1 expenditures that fell within FY23. But some will have reimbursements that were received after June 30th of 2022. And if you received a reimbursement after that June 30th date, remember that falls in the reporting period because it's based on when the reimbursement was received, then you would need to report that in this year's instrument. The ESSERF data collection instrument is due no later than A, March 15th, B, April 17th, C, April 25th, or D, May 3rd. And that is D, May 3rd. And of course, we encourage you to start working on that and get that in sooner as we get busier towards the end of the school year. But May 3rd is going to be that final due date. If all students took part in summer school, you must still list the number of eligible students that took part in the activity based on subgroup data information. Is that true or false? And that would be true. You still have to break that out by subgroups for those activities. This year's ESSERF data reporting period is it A, March 13th, 2020 to June 30th, 2022, B, October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023, C, July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, or D, June 30th, 2023 through July 1st, 2023. And that, of course, is C. It is that FY23, the state fiscal year is what we go by, July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. And that is when your when your reimbursement was received. That is going to determine if you will report it in this year's instrument. Expenditures should only be reported toward the 20% set aside if they were tagged and approved as learning loss. Is that true or false? And that one is true. If it was not tagged and approved in that funding application, then it should not be noted as learning loss in the instrument. Last one. An LEA pays for an ESSER eligible good on June 20th, 2022. They submit their reimbursement on June 30th of 2022. And they receive reimbursement from the state on July 15th of 2022. This should be included in the upcoming report. Is that true or false? And that is true. Because remember, I know we keep pushing this, but when the reimbursement was received is what you're going to base that on. And this was received within FY 2023. So it would fall in this reporting period. I'm going to pass it back to Michelle to share some resources and close us out.
All right. Thank you to everyone who joined us for the webinar today. We do have a collection of quick links at the end of the PowerPoint that will help you during this process. They are also available in TDO resources under relief funding, ESSERF data collection for year 2024. Also, if we can be of assistance to you, please feel free to reach out to us. We have our coordinator map. As Jerry Beth mentioned, I'm still helping with East Tennessee, so please feel free to reach out. Our email and contact information, we also have a slide that shows that. And we would be very appreciative if you would take a few minutes to complete the survey by scanning the QR code. This does help us to plan for future professional development and how we can best serve you. As always, if you believe you have witnessed fraud, waste, or abuse, please use the phone number or the website address listed below. And thank you for your time and have a wonderful day. Thank you.